What is going on, guys? Matt Downs with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports here to give you the edge for this Giants vs. Bucks showdown slate on DraftKings. Cannot wait to break it down. Hopefully everybody had a great NFL Sunday. That was followed up by a great matchup between the Chargers and the Steelers. Hopefully this next showdown slate lives up to those expectations, and I'm going to bring it to you right now. Now, before we jump into the slate, I want to give a quick shout out to our favorite partner, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a DFS website that allows you to pick the over or under on any certain fantasy point projection or single player prop. If you guys enter code using DGF on sign up, you get a 100% matchup to $100 to play. You guys can just play with the free money that you get loaded into your account. And if you lose, you never have to play again. And we're just giving you a free $100 if you guys do deposit today using code DGF. But if you do like the website, then we will also be giving away a free prize pick entry every single slate. But now let's go ahead and dive right into this DraftKings NFL slate here between the Giants and the Bucks. Now this one looks to be a little bit lopsided, at least just looking at the Vegas odds as of right now. It is a 50 over-under, which is relatively higher scoring. However, the Bucks are favored by 11 points. So when taking a look at the actual Vegas totals here team by team, the Bucks are projected to score 31 points and the Giants are projected to score 20. So it's, again, very lopsided. So keep that in consideration when doing your lineup construction and your overall builds. I always talk about defenses and whether they are viable. Last night, they were definitely not viable. Tonight, I can pretty much say the exact same thing. I do think you need to include the Bucks in your player pool just because, again, the spread does identify this being a lopsided affair. And they are at home. So at $5,200, definitely don't mind that to include in your player pool. Again, they would have to score a touchdown in order for them to be viable. Personally, I am getting rid of both defenses. I always do that to gain an extra edge because as you guys can see, both defenses are carrying some type of ownership. 14.3 and the Giants they look like they're carrying about 10.5% in GPPs. That doesn't make any sense. So yes, I will be full fading the defenses yet again. But now let's go ahead and talk about the positions other than the defenses, starting out on the Giants side here. We're going to be going position by position, talking about whether each player is cash or GPP viable and my reasoning behind it. Right now, Daniel Jones at $9,600 is carrying a tremendous amount of ownership here, 45.2% ownership. And that's probably under the assumption that he's going to be throwing a majority of the game. They are going to be playing from behind. And he has all three of his starting wide receivers back for like the first time this season. So hopefully they can stay healthy. Hopefully Daniel Jones can keep this relatively competitive with those wide receivers. And his price tag is actually pretty cheap at $9,600. So I do like him here. Projected 16 fantasy points, which isn't horrible at that price point. So yes, I definitely think that Daniel Jones is cash viable. I think he is pretty much close to a lock. I do think Tom Brady is safer on the other side for obvious reasons. But Daniel Jones, again, high risk, high reward type of player here, regardless of the contest that you're playing. Next on the list here is going to be the running back situation for the Giants. It is a bit in question right now. Both Saquon and Devontae Booker are questionable. So yes, if either one of these guys are held out, then we got to look at the backups here. Eli Penny next in line. And usually they go with a workhorse type back here. Both Devontae Booker and Saquon Barkley are those three back type of backs. So if Saquon is active, which we expect him to be, he is the focal point of this offense, carrying 25.1% ownership. However, the Bucks are very good against rush defense, so Saquon Barkley, not my favorite player. He's actually not cash viable as of right now. According to Vegas totals and all the PrizePicks projections that they have for Saquon, he is projected to put up 12.9 fantasy points at a 7.8K price tag, which isn't the best. So I definitely think Saquon's more of a GPP play. I do have a lot more trust here in the wide receiver situation because, again, Daniel Jones should be throwing the ball the majority of the game. However, I don't mind Saquon Barkley as the last piece. He's definitely more of a GPP play. His price point is relatively low, so take that into consideration. But yes, I definitely don't think you need him in cash. And Devontae Booker, of course, if Saquon Barkley is active, I definitely don't like him. We have him projected for 2 fantasy points against a good rush defense. I wouldn't even play him in GPPs, honestly, unless he is starting for Saquon. If Saquon's ruled out, he has also been limited all week in practice, so that's another thing to pay attention to. Again, we will be monitoring this injury report leading up through lock. Next on the list is going to be the wide receiver picture, and like I said before, all three of these wide receivers are active, and they are the stud wide receivers that we should be focusing on for this offense. The one thing I love about all these wide receivers are their price points. Right now, Kadarius Toney is projected at $6,800. Well, he is $6,800 projected at 10 fantasy points. We have Kenny Golladay, $7,000 projected at 9 fantasy points. And then we have Slayton projected at 8 fantasy points at $3,200. All three of these wide receivers make sense, and I think they're fantastic, cheap options here for the slate, especially given the upside. Again, Daniel Jones should be throwing the ball the majority of the game. And when we take a look at the snap counts here, just looking back to last week, this was the first game we saw with all three active. They all split the snap counts here at 55%. So all these guys are going to be on the field the exact same amount of time. I do like the upside a lot more here on Kadarius Toney at $6,800, more than any of the other two wide receivers here. Kenny Golladay is in play, but I think he's more of a GBP option because of his price point and his projection. Right now, it's only at 9 compared to Toney's 10. I know it's only 1 point, but Kadarius Toney has proven to be more consistent here in this offense. And then Darius Slayton is probably my favorite value play on the slate in terms of overall upside at $3,200. He's projected at 8 points, and he could easily just come out and be the wide receiver one in this offense and in this game specifically. Again, being on the field just as much as the other guys, I really do like the price point here. $3,200 makes for a lot of flexibility, and he has some good upside. So Darius Slayton is probably going to be one of my favorite cash locks here. Same thing with Kadarius Toney, and I do think Golladay, even though I don't hate him in cash, is definitely more of a GBP option. And then switching over to the tight end position, don't have any real interest here. Kyle Rudolph is an okay value play, but again, Evan Ingram is back, and all 3 of the leading wide receivers are back. So that definitely takes me off of the tight end number 2 here of Kyle Rudolph. Don't hate him as a last piece in GBPs. He's projected 5 points, and he has been finding those consistent, red zone targets. He's gotten 5, 3, 2, 2 receptions, or rather targets here the last couple games. And at $2,200, I definitely don't hate it, but I do think he has limited upside here in this contest. And then last but not least, we do have the kicker to talk about, Graham Gano. I definitely have more interest in Suckup, even though Gano's been on fire this season. He has to keep it close in order for him to pay off his price point because, usually when the team's playing from behind, they don't rely on their kickers. They're not going to kick field goals the entire game if they are down by a couple touchdowns. So I definitely have the upside more so on Suckup than I do on Graham Gano. And now let's switch over to the Tampa Bay Bucks. You're starting at the quarterback position. We have the GOAT at 11.2K. He is also a cash lock. Him and Daniel Jones should be in your cash lineup regardless. Tom Brady is the more viable captain option. He has projected the most points on this slate. However, I don't recommend playing him at the captain position in bigger GBPs. Rarely is a pocket type quarterback the optimal quarterback in bigger GBPs. It's usually the skill position players. And speaking of skill position players, let's switch over to Leonard Fournette, who is the 3rd most obvious cash option here on the slate. Again, you got to think about game script here. Because the Bucs should be playing from ahead, they're going to be relying on Leonard Fournette even more so in this contest, and he's been a beast as of late. He's clearly the running back number 1 in this offense. He's projected 16 points, which is more than any of the other players on the other side of the ball. So I think despite his price tag, even though I think it is a bit high, I think he has the most sheer upside here on the slate at 16 fantasy points. Him, and then looking at these other 2 running backs, I actually don't mind them. Again, you got to think in terms of a blowout type of game script. These 2 should get run. Why would you put Leonard Fournette out there when you're up by 2, 3 touchdowns, near the very end of the game, when Ronald Jones and Gio Bernard are definitely viable at $1,400 and $1,800? I do think you have to include them in your player pool. And in terms of ownership, they're actually showing higher than I thought they would. So Ronald Jones, we have projected for 3.9 points, and Gio Bernard, we have projected for 4. So both covering their price points. They literally have to get to about 4 points to cover it. And I do like both of them. I think they are viable options, at least in GBPs. And then switching over to the wide receiver position, we have some 3 really good options here. We have Chris Godwin at 16 fantasy points projected right now, but also cheaper than Mike Evans, who's projected less than him. So I do think Chris Godwin is going to be yet another cash option. $9,400 is definitely not too expensive. He is the wide receiver 1 in this offense and has been more consistent as of late than Mike Evans. Mike Evans at 10.2K, definitely don't mind him here at 31.9%. However, I do prefer him more as a GBP option. Again, both of these 2 wide receivers could have a ceiling game, and they could be the highest scoring players on the slate. However, for cash, Chris Godwin is easier to land on. Then Tyler Johnson, really don't have too much interest here. Definitely more of a GBP option. We haven't projected for 3 fantasy points with Gronk being back in the lineup here. Obviously falls to that 4, maybe 5th option here in this offense in terms of receiving. And at 5K just really doesn't make sense. I definitely prefer the Giants wide receivers on the other side of the ball. And then we do have to talk about Gronk. Gronk is back here, projected 8 fantasy points. We know one of Tom Brady's favorite red zone targets of all time. I do like him here for GBPs, just don't think he's cash viable. 6.2K is a little bit too expensive, especially since we don't know what to expect here in the very first game back. Cameron Brate and OJ Howard are still viable, I would say, in GBPs because of their price points here. Brate right now at 3.6K and OJ Howard at $1,200, and they are projected some fantasy points, and they actually do see the field even with Gronk playing. So don't mind them as last pieces here in GBPs. If they steal a touchdown, they could definitely break the slate, but only GBP options. All 3 of these tight ends, I definitely don't think you prefer them as cash options. And then I definitely do like Suckup here as a last piece in cash. He's $4,200, so that does make sense. He's averaging 7.3 fantasy points here on the season, so just a safe overall option. If you happen to land on him in cash, definitely don't mind that here, showing decent ownership as a last piece. And one thing I always like to do, and again, this is through Fantasy Crunchers, crunching out my builds based on my projections, and these do change throughout the day. By the way, all of our projections will be uploaded to our website specifically for the Showdown slate. If you guys want to sign up for dgfantasy.com, for only $10 a week, you can do that, or $20 a month. So very cheap and affordable. All these projections will be uploaded, and you can download them into a CSV and upload them to any optimizer that you do prefer. But just taking a look at my builds, these are the guys appearing in the most builds as of right now. Saquon, we have Kadarius Toney, who's one of my favorite overall value plays on the slate. Fournette, Daniel Jones, Tom Brady, Mike Evans. And then just to look at some very good value plays here, it looks like Suck Up is appearing in a lot of my builds. And there's really not any other options that are appearing. Well, I guess Kyle Rudolph is the last piece here at 22% of my builds. And again, this will all change leading up through lock. But this slate is pretty straightforward. I think for cash, you got to prioritize Toney, Fournette, Daniel Jones, and Tom Brady. Come back with your cheap option being Suck Up. I just gave you guys like 5 total plays here, so you should be able to build a cash lineup pretty easily. And then for GPPs, I will be uploading my favorite captain plays specific by contest selection. So for instance, for smaller GPPs, it will be somebody like Tom Brady. And then for bigger GPPs, you're going to want to get different guys like Slayton in your captain spot, Kenny Golladay, Evan Ingram, those guys that are flying under the radar. And then last but not least, got to give you guys my favorite prize pick here on the slate. It's going to be Kadarius Toney at 36.5 receiving yards. That is my favorite overall play. That just seems very, very low for a wide receiver 1 type quality player from a game script where they should be playing from behind. I really do like the 36.5 receiving yards over. And that will wrap up my video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you did, please do hit that subscription button, notification bell, and of course, smash that like button for all of our future NFL content. With all that being said, have a great rest of your day, and let's cash.